I cheated on my husband and left him, but when he got rich and couldn't find love, I went back to him and left my lover. Back in high school, I started dating this guy. Let's call him Jake. He was my first real love. We met in sophomore year during biology class when he asked to borrow my notes, because he'd slept through the lecture. I thought it was cute how he blushed when I handed them over. From there, it was like we were glued together. We went to prom, graduated together, and even picked the same college so we wouldn't have to do the long-distance thing. I loved him so much back then. He had this goofy laugh and always made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We got married right after college, young and dumb, thinking love was enough to carry us through anything. Fast forward a few years, and we'd been together for almost a decade. I was 28, he was 29, and life started feeling heavy. We had an apartment, a dog, and a routine: work, home, sleep, repeat. Jake was always chasing something big. He'd talk about these grand plans to start his own business and get us out of the paycheck-to-paycheck grind. I believed in him at first. He'd get so excited sketching out ideas on napkins at dinner, and I'd nod along, thinking maybe this time it'd work. But it never did. He opened a coffee shop that tanked in 6 months because he didn't know how to manage inventory. Then there was a tech startup that never got off the ground because he couldn't find investors. Each failure left us with more debt, credit cards maxed out, loans piling up. I was working a steady job at a marketing firm, paying the bills while he chased dreams that never landed. After a while, I started looking at him differently. The guy I fell for in high school wasn't there anymore. He was still sweet, still tried to make me laugh, but I couldn't ignore the mess we were in. He'd come home exhausted from working on his latest project, a custom furniture business, and I'd just feel this pit in my stomach. We were drowning financially, and he kept digging us deeper. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I ended up here. I loved him once, but love wasn't paying the rent or fixing the hole in our lives. That's when I started pulling away, little by little, without even realizing it at first. By the time Jake started his furniture business, I was checked out. He'd spend hours in the garage sanding wood, talking about how this was going to be the one that turned everything around. I'd hear him through the walls, the buzz of the saw cutting through my patience. He'd show me sketches of tables and chairs, asking what I thought, but I'd just shrug. I didn't believe in it anymore. The coffee shop had been a disaster, the tech thing was a joke, and now he was betting on handmade furniture when we could barely afford groceries. Debt collectors were calling, and I was the one picking up the phone, making excuses while he tinkered away. I started resenting him, not just for the money, but for how stuck I felt. I'd scroll through Instagram at night, seeing friends from college buying houses, taking vacations, living lives that didn't look like mine. Jake and I were still in the same cramped apartment, with the same stained carpet and leaky faucet we couldn't afford to fix. I'd look at him sleeping next to me, snoring like nothing was wrong, and feel this mix of anger and emptiness. He wasn't successful. He wasn't even close. I'd married him thinking we'd build something together, but all we had was a pile of bills and his endless optimism that I couldn't buy into anymore. I stopped kissing him goodnight. I stopped asking about his day. I didn't want to hear about wood stains or delivery schedules. That's when the doubts got loud. I'd think about what my life could have been if I hadn't tied myself to him. I was still young. 28 wasn't too late to start over, right? I'd catch myself staring at guys at work or the gym, wondering what it'd be like to be with someone who had their act together. Jake kept writing me little notes, leaving them on the fridge. "I love you, we'll get through this." But they just annoyed me. He didn't get it. I didn't want to get through anymore. I wanted out. I started staying late at work, not because I had to, but because I didn't want to come home to him and his latest failure. The distance grew, and I let it. It didn't take long for the distance to turn into something else. I was at a work happy hour one night, avoiding home like usual, when this guy, let's call him Mark, started talking to me. He was a client, older, maybe 35, with a sharp suit and a confidence Jake never had. He bought me a drink, asked about my job, and actually listened when I talked. It wasn't some big romantic moment. It was just easy. I didn't tell him I was married. I didn't want to. For once, I wasn't Jake's wife, the one stuck in a sinking ship. I was just me. We exchanged numbers, and I went home feeling a rush I hadn't felt in years. Mark texted me the next day, casual at first, just asking how my morning was. I'd replied between meetings, keeping it light, but it escalated fast. Within a week, we were meeting up after work. The first time was just coffee, but then it was drinks, then dinner. I'd tell Jake I had a late project, and he'd nod, trusting me like always. Mark wasn't some broke dreamer. He had a good job, a nice car, and no debt dragging him down. Being around him made me realize how much I'd been missing. He'd pay for everything, no hesitation, and I liked that. I liked not worrying about the bill for once. The first time I slept with Mark was a month after we met. It happened at his place, a clean condo with a view, nothing like the mess I lived in with Jake. I didn't feel guilty, not then. I felt alive. Jake was still texting me, asking when I'd be home, but I'd mute my phone and stay with Mark instead. It wasn't love, it was escape. I started seeing Mark more, sneaking around, making up excuses. Jake never suspected a thing. He was too busy with his furniture, too wrapped up in his own world to notice mine was falling apart. I'd come home late, shower off Mark's cologne, and crawl into bed next to Jake like nothing had changed. But everything had. After a few months with Mark, I couldn't keep pretending at home. Jake was still plugging away at his furniture thing, coming in with sawdust on his jeans, talking about some big order that was almost confirmed. I didn't care anymore. I'd stopped looking at his sketches, stopped nodding along. One night, he tried to hug me when I got back late from Mark's, and I pushed him away. He looked confused, asked what was wrong, but I didn't answer. The next day, I packed a bag while he was out delivering a chair. I left a note on the counter, short, no explanation, just, "I'm done." I didn't want a fight, I just wanted out. I moved in with Mark. He didn't blink when I showed up with my stuff, said I could stay as long as I wanted. His place was an upgrade, big bed, granite counters, no dog hair on the couch. He took me out to nice restaurants, bought me clothes, paid for trips. We went to Miami for a weekend, stayed in a hotel with an ocean view, and I didn't have to check my bank account once. It was luxurious, the kind of life I'd been scrolling past on Instagram. Jake kept texting me, begging me to come back, saying he'd change, that he loved me. I'd read them and delete them. He wasn't part of this new world I'd found. Living with Mark was easy at first. He worked long hours, so I had the place to myself a lot. I quit my job, didn't need it with him covering everything. I'd sleep in, order takeout, watch TV. It was freedom. Jake's furniture business was a distant memory, something I'd laugh about when Mark asked about my ex. I'd tell him how Jake was always failing, how I'd wasted years on him. Mark would nod, say I deserved better, and I'd agree. I didn't miss Jake, not the debt, not the stress, not him. I had everything I wanted now, and I wasn't looking back. Living with Mark was great for a while, maybe 6 months. The fancy dinners, the weekend getaways, the no-worries lifestyle kept me hooked. But then it started feeling repetitive. We'd go to the same restaurants, order the same drinks, sleep in the same bed with the same routine. He'd come home from work, tired, and I'd be there, waiting for something to happen. I didn't have a job, no real purpose, just his money and his condo. I'd scroll through my phone all day, but even that got old. I started picking fights with him over dumb stuff, like how he left his shoes by the door or didn't text me back fast enough. I wasn't in love with him, I was just there. Jake's texts kept coming, every few days like clockwork. He'd say he missed me, that he was still working on the furniture business, that he'd never give up on us. I'd roll my eyes and block his number, but he'd find a way, new email, new account. It annoyed me, but I'd still read them before deleting. He was a ghost from a life I didn't want, and I had Mark now. Except Mark wasn't exciting anymore. The money was nice, but I needed more, something to shake things up. I started going out without him, hitting bars, meeting people. That's where I met Chris. Chris was different, younger than Mark, maybe 30, with a loud laugh and a job in real estate. He had cash too, but he spent it faster, wilder. We met at a club, and he bought me shots, danced with me, didn't care that I was living with someone else. I started seeing him on the side, same way I'd done with Mark when I was still with Jake. One night, I packed my stuff from Mark's place while he was at a conference. I didn't leave a note, just walked out. Chris had a bigger apartment, flashier car, louder parties. I jumped into that life head first, leaving Mark behind like I'd left Jake. Jake's messages kept pinging, but I was too busy with Chris to care. Chris was a whirlwind. He'd take me to rooftop parties where everyone was drinking expensive champagne, and he'd rent out private rooms just because he could. His apartment was huge, floor-to-ceiling windows, a bar stocked with top-shelf liquor, a bed that felt like a cloud. He'd hand me his credit card and tell me to buy whatever I wanted, dresses, shoes, jewelry. I'd walk into stores I'd never dared enter before, dropping hundreds without blinking. We'd drive his Porsche to the coast, stay in beach houses, eat lobster for dinner. It was the kind of life I dreamed about when I was stuck with Jake, scraping by in that dingy apartment. I didn't think about Mark much after I left him. He texted a few times, asking where I'd gone, but I ignored him. Jake, though, he wouldn't stop. His messages were longer now, talking about how he'd sold a few pieces of furniture, how he was paying off debt. I'd skim them, delete them, move on. Chris was the present, loud, fun, reckless. He'd throw cash around like it was nothing, and I loved being part of that. I'd post pictures online, me in a bikini by the pool, me with a cocktail at some fancy bar, and watch the likes roll in. Jake was a footnote, a guy I'd outgrown. Chris was who I wanted to be with now. But Chris wasn't perfect. He'd disappear for days, working deals or partying without me. I'd sit in his apartment, alone, waiting for him to come back. The high life was great when he was around, but when he wasn't, it was empty. I started wondering what Jake was up to, not because I missed him, but because his name kept popping up in my inbox. I'd compare Chris to him sometimes. Chris had money, sure, but Jake had been steady, even if he was broke. I pushed those thoughts away. I wasn't going back to that life. I had Chris, and that was enough, for now. Chris and I lasted about a year before I started feeling restless again. The parties were still loud, the money still flowed, but I was over it. He'd come home at 3 a.m., drunk, talking about some property he'd flipped, and I'd just nod, bored. I'd scroll through my phone while he slept, looking at nothing, feeling nothing. The Porsche, the beach trips, the designer bags, they didn't hit the same anymore. I'd built this life to escape Jake, but now it was just another trap. Chris didn't care about me. He cared about having someone hot on his arm, and I was tired of playing that role. Jake's messages had changed by then. He wasn't begging anymore. He'd write about his furniture business, how he'd landed a contract with a local chain, how he was out of debt. I'd read them late at night, Chris snoring next to me, and feel this weird pull. Jake wasn't failing anymore. He was making it. I'd check his social media sometimes, unblocking him just to see. He posted pictures of tables, chairs, a new workshop. He looked different, older, sure, but happier. I'd block him again, tell myself it didn't matter. I had Chris, the fast life, the cash. But the cracks were showing. One night, Chris didn't come home at all. I texted him, no reply. I waited 2 days before I packed my stuff, again. I didn't tell him I was leaving, I just took what I could carry and checked into a hotel. Jake's latest email was sitting in my inbox. I've got a big order coming up. I miss you, but I'm okay. For the first time, I didn't delete it. I sat there, staring at the screen, wondering what I was doing. Chris was gone, Mark was history, and I was alone with a suitcase and a bank account that wasn't mine. Jake was still there, building something. I started typing a reply. I didn't send that reply to Jake right away. I sat on it for a week, holed up in that hotel room, living off room service and my savings from Chris. I'd reread Jake's email every night, how his furniture business was growing, how he'd paid off the last of our old debts, how he still thought about me. It wasn't desperate anymore, it was calm, steady. I'd look at my life, suitcase on the floor, no real home, bouncing from Mark to Chris, and feel this itch I couldn't scratch. Chris hadn't even texted to ask where I was. I was done with him, done with that whole scene. Jake's words stuck with me, and I started wondering what he'd built without me. I drove to our old apartment one morning, just to see. It wasn't ours anymore. He'd moved out, probably couldn't afford it alone. I found his new place through a quick search online. He'd posted about his workshop on a business page. It was a house, small but nice, with a garage out back where he worked. I parked across the street, watched him carry a table out to a truck. He'd put on muscle, looked focused. I didn't get out of the car that day, just drove off. But I kept thinking about him. A few days later, I sent the reply. Hey, glad you're doing well. Can we talk? He answered in an hour, said yes, gave me his address like I didn't already know it. I showed up at his place a week after leaving Chris. Jake opened the door, surprised but not mad. His house was simple, wood floors, furniture he'd made, no clutter. He showed me the workshop, talked about his contracts, how he'd turned it around. I told him I'd left Chris, that I was on my own now. He didn't ask too many questions, just listened. I stayed for coffee, then dinner. By the end of the night, I was back in his bed. It wasn't planned, it just happened. He said he'd never stopped loving me, that he was glad I came back. I didn't say much, just let him hold me. His life was stable now, and I wanted that again.